All right, let's dive into one of the most personal questions we can ever ask ourselves. It's a question that gets right to the core of who we are and where we feel like we belong. We're going to unpack that feeling, see why it's so common, and maybe even figure out what normal really means.
Have you ever had that little voice in your head ask you this? Maybe after a weird thought, or a really big emotion, or just one of those days where you feel totally out of sync with everyone else. If you have, trust me, you are in very, very good company.
In fact, this is one of the most universal worries people have today. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign that you're self-aware, that you're trying to understand yourself on a much deeper level. So why does this feeling seem to be everywhere now? And maybe more importantly, what's the real-world cost of constantly worrying if you measure up to some invisible standard of normal?
Let's start with a number that really puts this all into perspective: 25%. Yeah, according to the Journal of Positive Psychology, that's how many people give up on their biggest goals, their dreams, just because they're afraid of being seen as different. That's a huge price to pay just for trying to fit in.
So what's feeding this fear? Well, a huge part of it is what you could call the modern comparison trap. It almost feels like our world is perfectly engineered to make us second-guess every little thing about ourselves.
You can kind of boil it down to three big things. First, we're all wired for social comparison. But social media has put that instinct on steroids. Second, the media bombards us with these flawless, unrealistic pictures of what life is supposed to look like. And third, the line between just having a personality quirk and having a real problem can feel super, super blurry. And all that constant comparing, it has a real, measurable effect. Here's the number that proves it. Research from the Journal of Personality shows that scrolling through those perfect, curated highlight reels on social media can literally cause our self-esteem to plummet by as much as 30%. That's a real psychological hit we're taking. And this just lays it out so clearly, doesn't it? On one side, you have the world we're shown, nonstop success, perfect happiness, and on the other side, you have real life. A messy mix of good days and bad days, wins and losses. That huge gap between what we see and what we live is exactly where that feeling of being abnormal takes root.
Okay, so this is the big aha moment. This is where we need a major shift in how we think about this. We have to completely rethink what normal even is. See, it's not some finish line you have to cross. It's way more fluid than that.
Psychologists call this the normality spectrum. And all it means is that basically every human trait, from how outgoing you are to how anxious you get, exists on a huge, wide continuum. Being different isn't the exception, it's the rule. Variety is the actual normal. So how do you know if your quirk is just a quirk or something more? This slide gives us a really practical way to think about it. The real question isn't whether a trait is weird, it's whether it's a guide or a roadblock in your life. A healthy trait, like Lila's daydreaming, actually adds to her life by fueling her creativity. An unhealthy one, like Ollie's compulsions, gets in the way of his life. That's the real dividing line, functionality. And once you get that distinction, it builds to something even more amazing. Because once you stop seeing different as bad, you can start seeing it for what it so often is, a genuine superpower. I mean, history is just packed with people whose so-called abnormalities changed the world. Just think about Albert Einstein. People thought he was slow as a kid. He didn't fit into the typical student mold at all. But his unique, abnormal way of thinking is exactly what allowed him to see the universe in a way nobody else ever had. Or how about Van Gogh? His intensely emotional and totally unique way of seeing the world was definitely not normal for his time. But it's precisely what makes his art so incredibly powerful and beloved today. And of course, you've got Steve Jobs. His ideas were constantly dismissed as crazy. He just refused to follow the normal rules of business and design, and that's exactly why he was able to launch a revolution. But look, this isn't just for historical icons. Take someone like Mehdi, a carpenter. His furniture designs were seen as pretty strange at first, but that exact uniqueness is what made him stand out and build a successful business. His difference was his market advantage.
Okay, so this all sounds good, right? But how do we actually do it? How do we go from that nagging, "Am I normal?" question to a place where we can actually embrace what makes us different? Let's get practical. Here's a simple little toolkit. First, redefine normal on your own terms. It's about your well-being, not someone else's highlight reel. Second, make an effort to embrace diversity in others and in yourself. Third, always come back to that idea of functionality.
And finally, some simple, proven habits, like just 5 minutes of journaling or meditation a day, can make a huge difference in your self-awareness and cut down on stress. The famous psychologist Carl Rogers absolutely nailed it with this one. The whole point isn't to become a perfect copy of what someone else thinks is normal. It's about becoming the most authentic and effective version of you. And that really is the big takeaway here. Chasing some vague external idea of normal is just a recipe for anxiety. The real journey, the one that's actually fulfilling, is about embracing that unique mix of traits and experiences that makes you who you are. So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. That one thing about yourself that you've always worried was abnormal, the thing you've maybe even thought was your biggest weakness, what would happen if you reframed it? What if that's actually the source of your greatest, most unique strength?